The State of the Union Address. What the Media Didn't Tell You. That evening, February 24th, 2026, something unusual happened inside the chamber of the United States Congress. Not a simple presidential address, not a routine speech that politicians deliver out of constitutional obligation. No. That evening, Donald Trump stepped up to the podium with the confidence of a man who believes, deeply, viscerally, that he is in the process of rewriting his country's history. And whether he is saving America or transforming it into something entirely new, one thing is certain: nobody in that room remained indifferent. This speech broke every record for length in recent American history, and that is not insignificant, because Trump is not the type to talk just to fill the air. Every extra minute was one more minute to hammer a message home, to drive a nail deeper, to make sure America heard, truly heard, what he had to say. So today, we are going to dissect this speech. We are going to go where the mainstream media refuses to go. We are going to look behind the curtain, analyze the words, understand what is truly at stake, and give you a complete and honest picture of this historic moment. Hold on tight, because what you are about to discover is going to surprise you. Let's start with the context, because to understand this speech, you need to understand the situation in which Trump delivered it. We are in early 2026. Trump is in the middle of his second term. The midterm elections are fast approaching, and the Republican Party must defend its majority in both the House and the Senate. The president knows that history is being written right now. He knows that every decision, every word, every symbol counts. And then there is something else, something that very few people truly grasp. In a matter of months, the United States will celebrate its 250th anniversary. 250 years. A quarter of a millennium of independence, democracy, and freedom, at least as it was defined by the Founding Fathers. And Trump is perfectly aware of this. It is no accident that he closed his speech by referencing the Revolution of 1776. It is no accident that he spoke of America's golden age. He is deliberately positioning himself as the heir of Washington, Jefferson, and Lincoln, as the man who, 250 years after the birth of the nation, is in the process of saving it. Whether you agree with him or not, you have to acknowledge one thing: it is an absolutely masterful communication strategy. Now let's dive into the heart of the speech, and let's start with the subject that dominated the entire address: the economy. Trump devoted an enormous portion of his time to talking about money, about inflation, about gas prices, about wages, about ordinary families who, according to him, are living better today than they were 2 years ago. And he did not use abstract statistics to back up his argument. No, he put a human face on those numbers. He invited Megan Hemhauser. Who is Megan Hemhauser? She is an ordinary American mother. She homeschools her children. In the evenings, she works as a waitress. Her husband operates heavy machinery and works overtime just to make ends meet. She is the very definition of the American working class. One of those families that works hard, asks for no handouts, and just wants a fair shot. And Trump announced before the entire Congress, before millions of viewers, that thanks to his tax reforms, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and an expanded child tax credit, Megan and her husband were going to pocket more than $5,000 extra this year. That their taxes were going to be cut by more than half. Think about that for a second. $5,000 extra in the pocket of a hard-working family. That is not an abstract number. That is groceries for an entire year. That is a car repair. That is rent paid. That is the difference between gritting your teeth at the end of the month and finally being able to breathe. Now, the question you need to ask yourself is this: are these numbers real? Does Trump's tax policy genuinely benefit families like Megan's? That is where the debates rage. Trump supporters say yes, the numbers speak for themselves. Critics say the big tax cuts primarily benefit the wealthy and large corporations. The truth, as it often is, probably lies somewhere in between. But what is undeniable is the rhetorical power of that moment. Trump is not talking to you about GDP. He's not talking to you about economic curves. He is putting a real woman with a real life in front of you and saying, "This woman is doing better." And thanks to whom? Thanks to me. That is politics in its purest form, and it is devastatingly effective. Now let's talk about the figures Trump put forward on inflation, because this is where things get really interesting. He said that core inflation had fallen to its lowest level in more than 5 years. He said that gas, which had reached over $6 a gallon in some states under Biden, now costs less than $2.30 in most states, and even $1.85 at certain stations in Iowa. If these numbers are accurate, and we have no reason to believe they were fabricated out of thin air, then this represents a significant economic transformation. 40-year high inflation was a painful reality under Biden. American families felt it every time they went grocery shopping, every time they filled up their tank. If that pressure has truly eased, then it is a concrete and tangible victory for millions of people. But here is what Trump did not say. And it is our job to tell you. The drop in energy prices is linked to multiple factors, many of which are beyond the control of any president. Global oil prices, OPEC production levels, the geopolitical situation, all of these play an enormous role. And some economists will tell you that disinflation was already underway before Trump even took office again. But on the other hand, Trump's energy policies, his famous drill baby drill approach, his liberalization of extraction permits, have undeniably increased American energy supply. And basic economics tells you that more supply equals lower prices. So it is not entirely wrong for him to claim some of the credit. The reality is that economic policy is complex. Nobody can control everything, but what Trump did in this speech was simplify that complexity into a clear and powerful narrative. Biden broke the economy, I fixed it. Simple, memorable, and politically very effective. Now let's talk about the subject that caused the most tension in the room, tariffs. Just days before this speech, the Supreme Court had delivered a stinging blow to Trump. It had struck down his use of an emergency law to impose sweeping tariffs on most of America's trading partners. And not just any justices voted against him, Elena Kagan, of course, appointed by Obama, but also Amy Coney Barrett, whom Trump himself had appointed to the court. A betrayal, from the Trumpist perspective. Those 4 justices were present in the room that evening, and Trump looked them in the eye. He called the decision unfortunate, and then he announced that he would find other legal avenues to implement his tariff policies. This reveals something deeply telling about Trump's personality and political philosophy. He does not back down. He does not capitulate. When one door closes, he looks for a window. When the Supreme Court says no, he says fine, we will find another way. That is either reckless obstinacy that threatens the rule of law, according to his critics, or admirable determination in the service of the American people, according to his supporters. But beyond the politics, there is a fundamental question here. Are tariffs actually good for the American economy? Trump says yes. He argues that tariffs protect American jobs, force trading partners to negotiate on equal footing, and help fund tax cuts for families. His opponents say that tariffs are a hidden tax on American consumers, that the prices of imported goods go up, and that trade wars always end up hurting everyone. Who is right? The economic truth is that both sides have valid arguments. Tariffs can protect certain industries under certain circumstances, but they can also trigger retaliation and raise costs for businesses and consumers alike. Economic history is full of examples pointing in both directions. What is clear is that Trump believes deeply in this policy, and he has absolutely no intention of giving it up, even in the face of the Supreme Court. It is impossible to talk about this speech without addressing immigration, because this is where, perhaps more than anywhere else, the emotion in the room was at its most intense. Trump invited families of victims of crimes committed by undocumented immigrants, including little Dalilah Coleman, a girl who was only 5 years old when she was critically injured in a highway crash in California. The driver responsible was an undocumented immigrant who had obtained a commercial truck driving license through Biden's open border policies. Doctors had said that Dalilah would never walk again, that she would never speak again, that she would not even be able to eat normally. And yet, that evening, that little girl was present in the chamber of the United States Congress, in first grade, learning to walk again. Let's be honest, it is impossible to look at that and remain cold. It is a heartbreaking human story, an innocent child whose life was shattered by the consequences of a failed immigration policy. And Trump knows it. He uses this story not because he is insensitive, quite the opposite, but because he wants you to understand, in a visceral and emotional way, why illegal immigration is not just an abstract debate about statistics and policies. It is a question of real lives, real families, and real tragedies. His critics will say, and they are not wrong, that highlighting individual cases to justify a broader policy is a form of emotional manipulation. That for every Dalilah, there are thousands of immigrants who work hard, contribute to the economy, and live peacefully without ever causing any harm. And statistically, that is true. But Trump responds to that in a very simple way. One more victim is one too many. And that is a position that many Americans understand and share. The truth about immigration is nuanced, complex, and can never be reduced to individual cases in either direction. But in a congressional chamber, in front of millions of viewers, nuance has very little room. And Trump is a master of emotional communication. Now let's talk about the heroes, because this speech was not only a political platform, it was also a tribute to extraordinary men and women. Royce Williams first, 100 years old, a century of life, a veteran of World War II, the Korean War, and the Vietnam War, and that evening, Donald Trump presented him with the Congressional Medal of Honor, the highest military distinction in America. The story of Royce Williams is absolutely staggering. In 1952, in the middle of a blizzard over Korea, his squadron fell into an ambush set by 7 Soviet fighter jets, 7 against 1, state-of-the-art Soviet aircraft, and Royce Williams alone shot down 4 of them, with 263 bullets in his own aircraft, wounded, but alive, and victorious. This story remained classified for more than 50 years. Royce himself did not want to talk about it, not even to his wife, and for decades, this man carried that secret, that extraordinary victory, without ever claiming the slightest recognition. There is something profoundly moving about that image, a 100-year-old man, sitting tall, finally receiving the recognition he should have received 70 years ago. America owed him that debt, and that night it paid it. Then there is Eric Slover, an Army helicopter pilot, the man who, in January, piloted the Chinook during the operation that led to the capture of Venezuelan dictator Nicolás Maduro, wounded under enemy fire, and decorated that evening with the Medal of Honor. And then there is Sarah Beckstrom, 20 years old, just 20 years old, a private first class, brutally killed in an attack in Washington, D.C., as Thanksgiving 2025 approached. Her parents were in the room, and they received their daughter's Purple Heart posthumously. Think about that for a moment. Parents receiving their child's medal after she died in service to her country. There are no words to describe that level of pain and sacrifice. And then Scott Ruskin, a Coast Guard rescue swimmer who saved 165 people during the catastrophic floods in Texas in July 2025. 165 lives, one man, extreme weather conditions, and an iron will to leave nobody behind. These stories matter, not because they are political, but because they remind us of what America is capable of producing at its very best. Men and women who, when faced with absolute danger, choose courage, who give everything, sometimes their lives, for their fellow citizens. Whatever your opinion of Trump, these heroes deserve to be honored, and that night they were. Now let's talk about the tensions inside the room, because this speech was anything but smooth sailing. Al Green, Democratic representative from Texas, was removed from the chamber. Not for the first time. He was holding up a sign that read, "Black people are not monkeys," a shocking declaration, deliberately provocative, designed to grab the attention of cameras and send a message about what he perceives as the systemic racism of the Trump administration. Ilhan Omar, Democratic representative from Minnesota, loudly called Trump a liar and a murderer from her seat after the president mentioned an alleged fraud linked to Somalia in her state. These incidents reveal something important about the state of American democracy today. Political dialogue is broken. Mistrust is total. Both sides are no longer talking to each other. They are screaming at each other. And that evening, in the most symbolically powerful room in American government, this fracture was visible to the entire world. Trump, for his part, did not miss the opportunity to turn the situation to his advantage. When Democratic lawmakers refused to stand up to affirm that the first duty of the government is to protect American citizens and not illegal aliens, he looked at them and said, "Isn't that a shame? You should be ashamed of yourselves for not standing up." And inside the chamber, chants of "USA, USA" erupted. This is where the genius, or the danger, depending on your perspective, of Trump truly lies. He transforms every moment of confrontation into an opportunity to position himself as the champion of the people against the elites. Every Democrat who refuses to stand becomes, in the Trumpist narrative, someone who chooses foreigners over Americans. It is a brutal oversimplification, but it works. And then there was that moment that brought a smile to the entire room, a moment of lightness in an emotionally heavy speech. The American men's ice hockey team, fresh from winning the Olympic gold medal, was present in the gallery, and Trump announced that goaltender Connor Hellebuyck would be receiving the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Olympic champions, military heroes, ordinary families, victims, survivors, Trump had carefully orchestrated the room as a mirror of the America he wants to represent. An America that wins, that fights, that sometimes suffers, but that always gets back up. So, what should we take away from this historic speech? What should we understand from this moment? First, Trump is writing a narrative, and that narrative is powerful. America was broken under Biden. America is rising again under Trump. The economy is recovering. The borders are secured. Heroes are honored. Families can breathe again. Second, there are legitimate questions about the numbers, the policies, and the oversimplifications. Economic reality is complex. Immigration is a nuanced subject. Tariffs have multiple and contradictory effects. Nobody, not Trump, not his opponents, holds the absolute truth on any of these issues. Third, the American fracture is real and deep. This speech did not heal it. It probably deepened it. The Democrats who refused to stand, those who shouted liar, they are not just engaging in political obstruction. They are expressing a fundamental distrust in Trump's intentions and methods, and that distrust is not going away anytime soon. Fourth, and perhaps most importantly, the heroes of this speech, Royce Williams, Eric Slover, Sarah Beckstrom, Scott Ruskin, transcend politics entirely. They remind us that America, despite its divisions, despite its fractures, despite its endless political battles, continues to produce individuals of extraordinary bravery and dedication. And that deserves to be celebrated by everyone, regardless of your political colors. Trump ended his speech with these words: "The revolution that began in 1776 is not over. It continues because the flame of liberty and independence still burns in the heart of every American patriot." Whether you see Trump as the guardian of that flame or as a threat to it, one thing is certain: America is at a crossroads. The decisions being made today in Washington will shape this country for decades to come, and each one of us, whether American or not, has every reason to watch, to listen, and to understand what is happening. Because when America changes, the entire world feels it. If this analysis brought you something valuable, if it helped you understand a historic moment in all of its complexity, without telling you what to think, but giving you the tools to think for yourself, then share this video with someone who needs it. Subscribe so you never miss one of our investigations, because our mission is to give you the depth that the mainstream media refuses to give you. History is being written right now. Make sure you are there to understand it.